Welcome to the Rachel Varga podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Varga, double board certified aesthetic nurse specialist since 2011 with over 20,000 rejuvenation procedures performed. I'm an international clinical trainer for other physicians and nurses as well, celebrity skin expert, having been featured on some of the world's top proactive aging podcasts, and much, much more. Learn more at rachelvarga.ca and enjoy today's episode. Welcome, everybody, to the Rachel Varga podcast. In today's show, we will learn about the latest innovations with nootropics in relation to aging and rejuvenation and how they can assist with your everyday life and your vibrancy and your vitality and just showing up as the amazing, beautiful, radiant human that you are and that you came here to be. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I warmly invite you to subscribe here on YouTube and on Apple Podcast. We're all over the place. Spotify, Stitcher. Please go ahead and subscribe. And here on YouTube, make sure you hit the bell so that you know when I go live next and when new episodes are available. I encourage you to be present in this live Q&A style interview. Drop us your questions on nootropics and how we can really optimize our performance. Let me tell you a little bit about today's guests. We have two guests here. We have Matt Gallant, is the CEO and co-founder of BiOptimizers and has a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. He's been a strength and conditioning coach for multiple pro athletes, a self-defense instructor, and has over 15 years experience formulating supplements. Matt probably doesn't know that I've done kickboxing and jiu-jitsu for the last 11 years of my life, so I'm sure we'll nerd out a little bit with martial arts here as well. And he's also a serial entrepreneur that's built over 13 profitable companies. Y'all know I've been preaching about my magnesium breakthrough by BiOptimizers from the mountaintops, and you can definitely get access to some of my favorite supplements, biohacking options, like what we talk about in today's episode at my favorites page at rachelvarga.ca/favorites. You're going to find some promo codes, some affiliate links. So when you purchase from there, it also helps to support this free content that I publish here on the channel. So we also have Mr. Noots joining us here today. And from building a radio at 5.5 years of age, that's pretty incredible, to conducting dangerous chemistry experiments. Well, what's dangerous? Let's get into that in a second. Building a helium neon laser from scratch before he turned 10. Wow, this is going to be a fun one. Science, chemistry, and physics were always first on the list of necessary activities for Mr. Noots. He spent his 20s in the Air Force, which has the perfect platform to become an endurance athlete and eventual bodybuilder. As a result of various life events and moving from sick to superhuman, he dove deep into performance-enhancing nutrition, which eventually leads him to become a chief product officer for Nootropics, mind-enhancing compounds and stacks. This is going to be such a fun interview. Welcome, Matt Gallant, and welcome, Mr. Noots. How are you all doing today?
Amazing.
This is great. I love both of your backgrounds, and I'm always a little extra excited when I get a fellow Be Kind. Yeah, I got my sweater says Kind Club. I picked this up at a local vendor the other day.
This was my dad. This is my dad.
Really?
He was a monk in his teens, a Trappist monk, so he didn't speak from 15 to 18. Then he became a Golden Gloves boxer.
Yeah.
And then my mother likes to say that your dad wanted to be a priest, but I made him a father. So, but anyhow, he passed away a couple of years ago. But he said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see." And he would often quote similar that along with Desiderata when we were hanging out as kids.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great poster to have in your background in your office to give you that reminder that, maybe he's still there with you, fighting for you in the background, and you're carrying on the legacy. That's awesome. So we're not going to talk about the Large Hadron Collider and CERN and all of that, unfortunately, in this episode, Mr. Noots. We can do a follow-up on that.
I thought you said you were fun.
Well, maybe we could sprinkle it in, but we have so much in store for everybody here on the show. But I definitely am going to be inquiring about the potential history of military application with nootropics that maybe you're exposed to in the Air Force. So how did you guys get into the world of nootropics? What's your stories? And really, how can also nootropics be helpful for our body, mind, spirit, and energy? Because that's what we love to talk about here on the show.
Yeah, I can start and segue to Mr. Noots. His name is Mark Heffinger. Anybody who's curious, we've exposed him, secrets out of the bag. Well, obviously, I've been focused on optimizing humans for a long time. My background was I got a weight set when I was 12, got obsessed with bodybuilding when I was 16. From 16 to 19, went from 147 to 235, training like 12 times a week. It was just life. But it was a really powerful experience to be able to change the body that much. Competed once, and that was the event where I met Wade. I was in the juniors class, and Wade actually won the whole show the next day, which was awesome. And we didn't really connect or talk, but I remember him. He was very memorable. A few years later, obviously I became a very successful personal trainer. I built 2 personal training companies and sold them. And throughout this journey, Wade and I connected, became friends, and launched the predecessor to BiOptimizers. And we were focused on bodybuilding. Obviously, Wade's a bodybuilding champion. Fast forward a couple years, Wade and I really started to experience biological optimization when we started super dosing on enzymes and probiotics and superfoods. This is like 19 years ago. And the difference we felt was mind-blowing. And we became more passionate about that than bodybuilding. Then a few years later, we relaunched and rebranded to BiOptimizers. But as far as the brain side, I was born alcoholic, became an alcoholic at 12, and kept going for 20 years. Hit bottom about 13 years ago. It's going to be my 13-year anniversary in February. And when I got sober, my brain was not as sharp as it was prior to obviously drinking and drugging. So it was kind of a journey. I started playing around with lion's mane and fish oil and photobiomodulation, which I can see some in the background. The V-Lite, which is a great headset. I started doing neurofeedback. I've spent about 150 grand on neurofeedback. I got a medical grade system in my house. All of these things helped, and then started playing around with nootropics, including smart drugs, modafinil, and so on. And they were powerful. However, everything changed when I met Mr. Noots. I was introduced to him last year. I was already working on nootropic stacks, but when I met him, I quickly realized, okay, here's a guy that's clearly superior than me, smarter than me at this, and let's make a deal. So the core value alignment with Mr. Noots was absolute, from the foundational stuff, which is again helping people go from sick to superhuman, which is what we're about at BiOptimizers. He was already doing that himself, and started playing around with all of Mr. Noots' stacks. Had fun for about 4 months playing with all the components, and then I put together the system that we have now, which is 9 different stacks combined in ways that are very synergistic, and we guide people through that journey. And basically, I think we're the only company that does really, truly personalized, customized brain-enhancing supplements. So that's been the journey from beginning to now. And I'll cue up Mr. Noots here.
Boom. So obviously we'll skip the early science stuff for the moment, but on the nootropic side, I was actually in early 90s. I was dropping a friend off. I was a white rat, by the way, in the military for a drug called Accutane. So, and it's really, really devastating. And at the same time, I was bodybuilding, and that combination had them giving me mega doses of this drug, and then driving to the Presidio from Central California, where I was stationed, every 2 weeks to do blood tests and saliva and urine and hair and everything else, and see how bad it was. To the point where they actually, at one point, they noticed a tumor forming on my shoulder blade, or just below the shoulder blade, and they eventually had to excise it, and it had grown tendrils that had wrapped around my rib. And so they pulled this thing out. It's about 9 inches long, and it looks like a squid. And not good stuff. We can talk about that, the side effects of that later. But in the early 1990s, I had a couple of technology companies that I had founded and was building. And on the way to dropping someone off at the airport at an extremely early hour of the morning to PDX airport, I was channels hopping on the radio, and I heard this incredibly intelligent sounding guy make a comment that was he was talking about a thing called huperzine A, and it's a acetylcholinesterase potential, right? To basically mitigate that enzyme that would break down acetylcholine and cause you to go through this kind of fall off on a curve of performance. I was fascinated by it. I called in, it was a radio talk show. I called in, I realized he was only half an hour away. So I drove up from the airport to where he was. He had a little tiny office, no bigger than my living room. And he was podcasting out of there, right, in 1993. And I said, dude, this is the most amazing thing. What can you teach me? And he was a biochemist out of University of Oregon. And so we exchanged. I helped him to build his company, and he showed me what nootropics were at the time. And that got my interest. And then I had a bunch of Intel engineers working for me. And there was an R&D group, an Intel R&D group. And I wanted to see if I could improve their cognitive performance reliably instead of watching them drink loads and loads of coffee all day. So I did huperzine A and a couple of other nutrients, right? Some choline. And within 2 weeks, we got them off coffee. Their cognitive performance improvement was palpable and measurable. And it was like the aha moment for me. And then we just fast forward here. In 1998, my youngest daughter was born on a couch in front of the fireplace. We'd become nutrition. I'm not going to say addicts, but we were pretty hardcore at that point, my wife and I. And at that moment, they gave her 4 oxycodone because she had torn. She was a fairly small girl. And so they gave her, the midwife gave her 4 oxycodone. And by 2008, she committed suicide on that very same drug. So she had fallen in love with it, was very good at hiding it. And so I had just helped sell the company. I moved to the Canadian border in the US, in Washington State. And I just spent the next 4 years hardcore using every available nootropic component and components of components and extracts that I would either make or find, and try to figure out how to get addicts unaddicted and what would be the process. And as a result, came up with the first stack. After 3,000 prototypes, I came up with the first stack that worked effectively. And it just so happened that inadvertently, this guy named Bradley Cooper came out with a movie that aligned with the performance output of the product. And a bunch of people in my beta test, I had over 1,000 at one point in the beta test. They said, "Hey, dude, this is just like that thing in that movie." So I called one of my great mentors in branding and said, "Hey, what do I call this thing?" And he did a quick lookup and he said, that's not a trademark name. So I just called it NZT, and it took off like crazy. And then ended up getting a bunch of really valuable high-tech customers, people at Facebook and the early guys at Napster, and it took off from there. And so I felt really fortunate. It was a hard sell. I didn't want to ever sell product. I just wanted to make really cool stuff. And but this kind of took off vertically, and I couldn't tamp it down. We eventually moved into a trailer at one point. We couldn't find anybody to lease to us because we're doing all these obscure extractions and things, and nobody understood it. And so we built a trailer, had a trailer built for us, and had our employees in there. And it was crazy. And we just grew vertically, and until Matt found us. And then that was an unexpected joy to find someone with as much resonance, spiritual, physical, right, mental resonance, and that had the capacity and was at the point where this made sense. So really, really, I mean, it's one of the biggest blessings I've had in my life has been meeting Matt, Wade, and the team, and being able to work with people that so care about people's health, wellness, vitality, right? So that's a little bit of the story.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, right now, more than ever, it really is about cultivating your high vibe tribe. So hanging out with the two of you, Matt and Mr. Noots, I am just feeling like I am in the right company. Before I get into a couple of questions, I'd love to just do a quick medical disclaimer. So as you all know, what we discuss here on the show is not medical information. It's educational information only. If you think you have a medical condition, you must seek the guidance of a licensed physician. But let's just learn as much as we can so that we can make the most informed decisions possible. I think that's really interesting that you shared that you were on Accutane. And for some of you tuning in, Accutane is a very regularly prescribed medication for acne. It basically dries everything out. I've certainly seen a number of clients have benefits from it, but also some pretty serious side effects. So there are many ways that we can mitigate acne through great skincare, through some great home care, and also some in-clinic rejuvenation options. So if you have any questions for you all tuning in here, that's my jam. Shoot me an email, info@rachelvarga.ca, or book a one-on-one with me. All the links are down below and I can help you all navigate that. But thank you for shedding light on that, because it is something that's literally everywhere in the skin space for acne, when really we want to look at what are some of the underlying factors that are contributing to inflammation. And of course, with BiOptimizers, the gut, right? How we can keep all those inflammatory mediators from spilling out of the gut. That's the leaky gut thing that you've all heard about, those inflammatory mediators escaping the gut and then going throughout the body. And the skin is definitely going to be a reflection of what's going on the inside. So you guys have some great products to help out with that. Matt, I think that's really cool what you mentioned when you first met Wade. You were kind of attracted to him in a way. And I'm curious if it was a level of radiance. And I would love for even you guys to just right now, while you talked about like what drew you to Wade, what attracts you to people right now, and what is radiance in your opinions?
Well, my belief is that we're all pulled to different people because of attractor fields, level of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, it's both Wade and I's belief that we're here to do a lot of good in the world, and probably our destiny, probably predestined and pre-chosen and selected, and however you want to see it. But that's what it's felt like. And it's been a great journey, challenging one for both of us. And we both agree that we've never grown as much from any relationship as we have from our business relationship. So yeah, it's been awesome, and he was, when I walked out of the weigh-ins the Friday, I turn around and Wade steps on the scale and does the lat spread to intimidate anybody else in the room. So the first thing I ever saw of Wade was his lats. And then, it was awesome. I mean, at the time I was super passionate about bodybuilding, and I remember, the crowd going crazy when I think he was posing to Conan that night, Conan the Barbarian music. And it was, and then a few years later, he came back to visit his parents, and we just connected. I was already decided to move to Vancouver. He was living there. So he was just kind of a few years ahead of where I wanted to go in life. And when I moved to Vancouver, he took great care of me, and the rest is history. So as far as radiance, I think it's being magnetically drawn to levels of consciousness. And I think we're always radiating whatever our level of consciousness is. And that's what impacts people. And it's way beyond words. It's invisible.
Yeah, agreed.
Mr. Noots, do you think there's an element of the Higgs boson field to do this? I'd love for you to put your scientific spin on that.
I think spooky action at a distance is absolutely true. And I think Matt and I have experienced it. There are times when you're with people. I remember when I met my first really, really good best friend, which was just before my sophomore year in high school. His nickname is Toilet. It's the kind of people I hang out with. And Toy and I, his name is Steve Johnson, and John is a toilet, so we call him Toilet, right? Because you always go to the lowest common denominator when you're in ninth grade. And he picked me up, my card broken down. He picked me up to go to a party. This is before the school year started. Somebody just said, "Hey, Toy, you got to go meet this guy. He's a brand new kid. Pick him up. He knows how to clear a bong." And so he picks me up, and we literally went right into a Steve Martin sketch, like the moment we met, right? And we had that. When Matt and I first got on our first call, it was going to be a real quickie because our COO is in London. And so he was on the call as well. I think we went for 5 hours. So Andy was like 3 a.m. or something crazy like that. But I think there's, and it wasn't just the intellectual fire, like back and forth. It was I was in meditation many years ago, 30 something years ago. And I was looking for purpose. I was like, what is my purpose? And it crystallized. You know how they come to you? Like the words just flow in. You can't, it's like poetry or like a great song lyric or, right, one of those components. And it was to make a monumental contribution to every life I touch. And that was like, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And so, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do it on an individual basis. I've always loved creating stuff and making lots of stuff. So I think that the tool that we have, that all of us have, is both the communication medium that we've got access to now, right? We're less than a degree away from anybody we want to connect with, but also the tools we have, like making really cool things that can change people's lives by enhancing vocabulary or enhancing the verbal fluency, right? Cognitive performance, mood, states, as Matt likes to say, states, huge. So.
That's great. And Mr. Noots, with your background, I'm so sorry to hear of your wife who passed, and also your history with alcoholism and then getting sober. I think a lot of people over the last couple of years, if we were to look at like overdoses and people looking into substances to try and cope with what's happening right now, I do like the idea that you're giving a bit of a replacement and something that could actually be of a positive benefit to their body, mind, spirit, and energy to help them feel better and provide a bit of calmness. So for me, after 2 car accidents, were not my fault. I could have taken the woe is me card, but I dove into biohacking for pain, nervous system regulation, and all of that. So that's really helped me. But you guys have nootropics that also can lend to a sense of like calmness and mental focus and clarity, and what do we need to get ish done and feel a little bit more confident. So these things are available and they can be custom formulated, which is really cool. So when we're talking about a stack, you all have heard me on the show here talk about how I have like an immune stack, how I have a hormone balancing stack, how I have an adrenal support stack, how I have a gut health stack, and nootropics is a whole other stack to promote more mental clarity and all of that. Can you guys shed a little bit of light onto how we can stack nootropics to optimize certain aspects of our lives?
First of all, I think stacking, compounding is one of the most powerful things anybody can do for anything. I first discovered stacking back in the bodybuilding days. Bodybuilders, I know Dave Asprey said this, and it's true. I mean, bodybuilders were really the first biohackers, if you will. I mean, they'll stack all kinds of things from growth hormone, testosterone, steroids, insulin, crazy amounts of training, supplements, the food. I mean, it is this incredible stack, which allows them to put on superhuman levels of muscle mass. The other place where I really saw the power of stacking was when I got into edge gambling, which is looking for advantages. And I played a lot of poker and many other games. And I remember walking around the casinos in Las Vegas with a good friend of mine who had studied casino marketing, and he's decoding everything that's going on. So we're walking, and he's like, okay, first of all, they're pumping oxygen. And then we're walking, and he's like, okay, to see that carpet, it's ugly to bring your eyes up. It's visually busy, so your eyes don't like that. C major is playing in all the machines, which the human ear loves that. The bathrooms are buried. The restaurants are buried. So you have to walk in front of the casinos. They're giving you free alcohol to make you make more stupid decisions, like continuing to gamble. And he's just breaking it all down. And then it hit me. I'm like, yeah, people talk about the edge at the tables. That's nothing. It's this stack of edges that allows them to win. And we know the house always wins. And I think with our health, with our bodies, or with our brains, when we start stacking a lot of different elements, we can multiply the results. And it's awesome because our lab team in Bosnia the last couple of weeks is proving we're testing various cofactors with enzymes and probiotics, and we're testing different dosage levels. And the fascinating thing is, and this is a great validation for the power of cofactors, sometimes we're getting the same result with literally 5% than we are with 10, 20 times the dosage in terms of improving the enzymatic activity. We're improving the biofilm formation, the doubling rates, all of these different elements. So when we're building stacks, and Mr. Noots, in my mind, is the greatest nootropic stack designer on the planet, there's a lot of things in there that, again, multiply the effects and they compound, and you're able to achieve a much better result than just using brute force with one thing. So with that being said, Mr. Noots, talk about the magic of nootropic stacks.
Oh. Well, one of the misconceptions in the nootropic world, and it always has been since the beginning, is that you take aniracetam, right, alone. That's the thing. Or you take oxiracetam, or any of the racetam ones, or you take Noopept, and you get this kind of output, right? Input, output. In reality, what we found was that, and believe me, those 3,000 tests that we did originally, those haven't stopped. We've continued to do tests every week. And on top of that, we found that there were so many ways to go backwards by combining two elements that just were not complementary. They would actually mute each other. So one of the things we found was that people's inherent native biochemistry and neurochemistry is often out of whack, out of balance. And so just throwing a nootropic at it is not going to fix it. Like their oxidant levels in the body were going crazy, right? Their inflammation was off the charts. Their nervous system stimulation was too high. Any of those factors. So they throw stimulants at it and they say, okay, here, this will get you. And that's why you see in so many compounds on the marketplace, right? They're really, they're Red Bull, but in a pill. They're a bunch of candy and stimulant. So what we found as we were doing these experiments is that you needed an antioxidant, and really powerful antioxidants. You needed adaptogens so that your body wasn't, right, especially your adrenals. You talked about adrenal burnout, adrenal insufficiency, as is also like to said, that's so critical. If your adrenals are fried, it's so hard for you to get any kind of cognitive performance. And plus you're so short-winded, short-sighted, and short-tempered that it's very difficult to have any follow-through on anything worthwhile. So the performance curve may be palpable for a very short amount of time, but you want something that's sustained, and you want your baseline to be permanently changed if possible, right? Raised. So you've got to have an antioxidant, you've got to have an adaptogen. You need to have whatever your core nootropic is, and understand it, and maybe even some cofactor nootropics that are going to affect your GABA or your acetylcholine levels, right? Or your dopamine levels or your anandamide levels. And then you're going to need something to keep your body from running out of choline, because you're basically hopping up the amount of neurotransmitter activities that are happening in your brain. And when you do that, you're basically overclocking your CPU. If you want to do it in a safe way, you're going to provide a choline donor, but you don't want to just shove choline at it. That can cause all kinds of fogginess as well. You want to have choline precursors and maybe a little bit of choline, right? So that you've got kind of this time release effect that's going to happen, so that the nootropic can adopt that at the right rate so that you get the optimum performance. And then you might need a little bit of a stim, but you don't want a hardcore stim, because that's going to cause all kinds of, again, secondary problems. You want just enough stim that while the conversion process is happening, as the nootropics flow through the blood-brain barrier and start going through all these enzymatic conversion processes, you might want something to kind of overcome that lag that's going to happen for a moment. And then as the nootropics come on, it's very smooth and you get this very extended process. And then, of course, you're going to want an oil element as well, because that's going to extend the half-life of the nootropics. So that's kind of how you build a stack. Those are the key components. And there's a bunch of other ways to look at it. And there's also, ways to combine. But there's a reason that like when you see our caps, I don't know if you can see that, that they're in layers. You can. One of my favorites, Apex, right there, is we build them in layers, not just because. By the way, it's way more complex to do it like this than it would be otherwise. We do it because when an individual signs up for our product, the service part of it kicks in and the customization process kicks in, because you tell us, you basically give us a medical journal on you, and then what your objectives are, right? What your goals are and what your biggest problems are. And then from there, we can start formulating that stack to give you the outcome that you're looking for. And so we change things plus or minus degrees, the amount, the milligrams, the grams, right? Micrograms even sometimes. And it makes a critical difference in the outcome of how the capsule works with you, or the drink, or the spray. So yeah, customization is a critical factor in high performance.
I love what you alluded to. There's really no point doing any of this stuff if you don't have your baseline figured out. The same thing goes with skincare and rejuvenation and all of that. There's no one magic beauty pill. Sorry, even if your social media ads seem to tell you otherwise. You got to do your basics with your skincare. Cleanse, moisturize, sunscreen, exfoliate. Let me know if you guys need some recommendations. Send me an email. My contact details are below. And then you add on the more advanced layers, like, for example, at-home chemical peels or at-home dermal rolling. Those are then more advanced layers. The same thing goes with taking nootropics and stacks. 100%. I take antioxidants every single day. Let me know if you guys need some skin focused antioxidants. I'm sipping on some adaptogens, some mushrooms from Hawaii, actually, which is pretty cool. And yeah, for stim, for sure, I've really dialed back on coffee myself, and I'm more into matcha tea now and a little bit of honey in the morning. And I got to say, my clarity, my stress levels, my level of calmness, it's really interesting when you start to play around with your antioxidants, your adaptogens, your stimulators. And I like that you did also mention oil, because we need fats because they make up our cells. But the crazy thing about doing nootropics is that, you're going to need different cofactors. And when you have just the right amount of cofactors, you're basically going to give your body the magical pieces of the puzzle to behave as the beautiful piece of machinery that it was designed to do. I absolutely love hearing you guys explain all this, which is great. It's not magic, it's science. It's just the magic is like when we don't quite have the science to back it up yet. That's why a lot of times when researchers are looking at stuff, they'll then revisit it. Like, say, for example, they're trying to reverse engineer some technology that they stumbled upon and we don't yet have the science to figure it out. They'll go back at it 10 years later and then maybe have some answers. So that's like some like deeper stuff that I alluded to. Maybe you'll pick up what I'm laying down there. But let's kind of dive into that a little bit. So, Mr. Noots, you have a background in the Air Force. I have military in my family as well. I've shared that here on the episode. I'm always keenly interested in how products that are initially used in like space or military aspects then make their way into consumer world, such as precision supplements, such as NASA air filtration that I use in my room here. All that stuff you can get at the favorites page at rachelvarga.ca that I love. But were nootropics ever utilized to enhance your performance? And did this potentially play a role in wanting to create your own custom formulas?
I wish I had known. I mean, back when I started bodybuilding back in the early 80s, actually it was 82, 83, 84. In 85, I left the Air Force in 85 and then went on to build and sell companies. So what I signed up, by the way, I was inducted into the military as an OSI agent, Office of Special Investigations. There used to be a show called A $6 Million Man, Steve Austin. And it was a great TV show. And in it, he was a NASA pilot. He was an OSI agent who crashed, and they rebuilt him and they made the $6 Million Man. And every time he activated his $6 Million Man cybernetics, you would hear this right as he's running and things like that. It was great. And I just loved that. I thought it was so cool. And as a young kid, those aspirational things, they really motivate you. So I signed up as that. And I've got a fairly high IQ, and they put me through a battery of tests, right? Where you're listening to one language in this ear, one language in this ear, and then on the green screen, you're watching another language, all foreign to you. And you're having to decide whether it's a Latin-based language, right? Or another, whether it's kanji characters, and then you have to try to transcribe it and figure it out. So I signed up as that. I ended up at the end of my 6-year career, I ended up as a jet aircraft technician. So I worked on, and I was part of a SWAT team. We had to get an aircraft in the air within 24 hours that was literally illegal. Because there's a very strict protocol on getting aircraft in the air, and we had to break all the rules to do it. I was with a group of 12 people, and we could take a B-52 bomber and take it from what's called a can bird, where they pull jet engines off of it and they pull parts of wings and parts of avionics off of it, and we had to put it all back together with duct tape and baling wire and get it in the air while the inspector general came on base. And so I got to do some really neat work. At that time, performance for us was literally, and Matt might relate to this, when you're leaning out, back then you would go, right, you'd carb up and you'd get it just as big as possible, and then you'd lean out and get as ripped as possible. Getting ripped meant unsalted popcorn. We'd buy it in these 3-foot tall bags at 7-Eleven and just eat popcorn all day. It was great. And then our cheat day on the weekend was on Sunday afternoon. We'd go have Skipper's Fish and Chips had unlimited fish and chips for $5. And when you're in the military, you don't have any. There's no money in the military. And so you'd go in and we would eat like 25, 26, 27 pieces of fish, right? And after about the 15th or 16th, you're peeling off the breading and just trying to handle it just to get there. But the military had interesting approaches to performance, and most of them were more the kind of things you would see David Goggins talking about, which was if I show you the limit that you can go to, and then I back off 10 or 20%, you'll think it's a walk, right? So that was the approach rather than a chemical approach. The other thing is when you're in the military, at least during the time I was in, you're basically signing up and you're signing off your rights to your own body. So there's a lot of chemical tests that can be performed, or like I was a white rat for Accutane that make it so that it's not that I didn't have a choice. It's that the choice was do or die. So you end up doing things. In fact, when the Accutane finally maxed after 6 months of dosing, I was in a Jesus rock band on a stage in front of 300 kids at this Baptist church singing a Triumph, the Canadian band Triumph. They had a song called Fight the Good Fight. So I'm singing Fight the Good Fight, right? I had my keytar on because I'd switched out the guitar into the keytar to finish the intro and the exit. And as I'm doing the exit and I'm having to hit this very high tenor note that Rick Emmett would hit, my neck cracked from ear down to collarbone and just bled. So the kids are listening to me sing a secular song, and I knew for sure, right, that Satan had entered the room and had caused my affliction. It was awesome.
Wow, there's got to be some layer of like your skin and your collagen and your soft tissue that was totally impacted by Accutane. The fact that you experienced that literally shredding of your skin, that's fascinating.
Oh, it was awful. Let me share some. I mean, and also the cognitive performance just degrades so bad. Sleep was almost non-existent. You felt like you were asleep, right? You'd sleep for 10 hours and you wouldn't have any real quality sleep. But in 1993, I took a 4-day weekend off. I went to a bed and breakfast, and an ND-MD said, "Hey man, you're cold and clammy on a beautiful warm day. I think maybe you've got a problem with the thyroid." So he He did a basal metabolic test every morning and found that I was hypothyroid. But the really interesting thing is he got me on an EWAT system, exercise with oxygen therapy, where I was on a treadmill while he was feeding me pure oxygen, and under my lat popped a silver dollar sized sore that bled a clear fluid. We sampled it, and it was over 80% pure Accutane. And this is 10 years after I had been on Accutane, and I had been a performance athlete between those periods. So I had sweated, I had gone through tons of water and everything, 10 years of it, and yet Accutane was still buried within my muscle.
So here's the thing. When we're testing stuff out, there's something in the world that's getting pushed out at record warp speed is the correct term. How long does it take to really, I know for rejuvenation, it usually takes a number of years to go through the appropriate process and the experimental phases, and there's multiple phases, and then it gets released onto the global consumer market. That's always how things have been. For you guys, when you're testing out your nootropic stacks, how long do you guys usually like to play with things? Because for the most part, you're using relatively already studied ingredients that have already gone through those processes. But just shed some light on how long it takes you guys to actually formulate.
Yeah, so I would say, at BiOptimizers and at Nootopia, every product, our goal is to make it twice as good, not just as our opinion, but in the lab as whatever the second best product is. So sometimes it takes longer. I'd say the longest it's taken is maybe like 18 months. And we do have a group called the BioLab Rats as people. And we send them samples and prototypes and we get feedback. And like I said, we got a lab team. So like with the enzymes and the probiotics, we're going to release truly, it's blowing our own current formulations. And so my favorite thing to do is to innovate. And earlier, as far as the magic is the human drive to push things to a new level. And yeah, we're using science to do that. But ultimately, somebody needs to say, hey, let's take this to the next level. And that's what we do. So yeah, that's I'd say the timeline is anywhere from like 6 months to 18 months. And it's, the more people we have, the better. We just invested in a $500,000 machine last year. It's an HPLC machine. We're using molecular docking, which a lot of pharmaceutical companies use, and it saves us about $20 to $30 million in lab tests that we can run simulations on. So we're trying to use a lot of technologies in order to achieve much faster results. And we're about to start using this new method where instead of using the LD50 method, and for those of you that don't know what LD50 means, it means increasing the dosage until basically 50% of people would die. And there's a better method where we can see the cellular damage, the DNA damage that a molecule causes at different dosages. So yeah, me and Mr. Noots, we're just passionate about, again, using science to innovate and to drive things to a different dimension. So yeah, whatever it takes is our motto.
And we have, Rachel, we have these incredible PhDs in Bosnia who, one of them, Jenin, is one of the top molecular docking technologists. So you think about in vivo, right? Well, he does in silico. So he's got a massive database that has quantified data and AI technology. And we can put a nutrient or a couple of them together. And you can say, here are the 400 combinations that could work, different variety of measurements. And here's kind of the outcome that could be present with that. And then it's much faster for us to test. We don't have to wait for maturity of that experience. We can accelerate those experiences. So.
And you guys are, of course, using consenting adults. Paperwork, this experiment, fully consented, abide by the terms, and all that good stuff. So it's important that experiments follow that, in my opinion.
Well, me and Mark we're both hardcore biolab rats. I love running experiments on myself. Yeah. So does Mark. So we're usually the first guys, and then if
Oh,
we're
yeah.
okay.
If we don't
I
die,
figured.
you know.
I figured.
It was funny at Dave Asprey's event in Florida. You could tell real biohackers from wannabes or early stage is if you handed them you hand them this capsule, right, and they take it and go, "What was that?" That's a real biohacker. If you hand it to them and they go, "What the hell's in this thing?" Right, then you know that it's somebody who wants to be there, but they're just not there yet.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. You guys are going to have a booth handing these out. Like, people that are in the biohack space, they already know about what you're doing and what you're up to. And you already have that earned trust and things like that. You don't need that paid media trust. Super interesting background, Mr. Noots. Obviously, yes, you have a high IQ to have been able to accomplish the things that you've accomplished. But I'm curious with intuition. I'm sure that was a part of it. I know that the military seeks out intuitive empaths for a number of different reasons and all of that. I'm just curious. I think I asked this Wade Lightheart. Can we take nootropics to become more intuitive?
Matt actually is a genius at this. In what we had done prior to meeting Matt, Wade, and team was we were building individual formulas and stacks to provide very specific functions, right? Whether it was mood enhancement or focus, right? Or some kind of energetic or ATP release, any of those factors. What Matt did was he built stacks of stacks. He said, you know what? These two babies together do a lot better than this one apart. And one of those, like the stack that Matt's probably on right now, right? Would be like an upbeat and a brain flow, those two together, because they're going to get the verbal fluidity for fluency is going to be increased. And also empathy is going to be much higher. Whereas if you go towards maybe focus savagery, you're going to get a lot of stuff done, but it might be right. But the intensity might not be as compatible with trying to build a relationship. So absolutely. In fact, there's stuff that we've got cooking right now in the lab that is orders of magnitude above in the empathetic side. We have an up and coming.
I want that.
Oh, we have an
Sign me up.
anandamide stack.
Sign me up.
We have an anandamide a bliss stack that'll be coming out sometime, and it is exactly what it says. Really leveraging the anandamide receptors in the body and capitalizing on their kind of pre-post orgasmic feeling. So
yeah, sign me up. That's pretty sweet. So is there a link between nootropics and potentially even slowing our aging process and helping our skin be more radiant? I know that you guys are able to create hyper-focused stacks. This is the stack I want everybody to get for women's health and all that. So let me know what you have right now that's available for that for my audience, and also what's coming down the pipeline.
Sure. Actually, probably our best anti-aging product, including for skin, is masszymes, but not in the way that we typically recommend, and which is usually to take it with your food. Hyperdose it by itself and watch what happens to your skin.
For sure. That's just an FYI, that's BiOptimizers mass enzymes, and you guys can get that using my promo code. It's all on the favorites page at rachelvarga.ca. Get this.
Yeah, like so about 9 weeks ago, I tore my Achilles and got reconstructive surgery. So I started using our injury protocol, which was to take 100 masszymes a day, mostly on an empty stomach. And yeah, it's really powerful. You just see your skin improve significantly. And we are working on skin stacks. We are working on a female focus product line, which we're super excited about. Should see that launch mid-year. And again, I think with skin, it's really about stacking, good food, avoiding, of course, things that'll create skin issues. Collagen, photobiomodulation is great, and then the topical products on top of that. I think the combination of looking at it and compounding all of these different levels can create some significant improvements in skin quality. So
we have a nootropic drink that'll be coming out the end of Q1, middle of Q2. that we've perfected, and Matt will attest, it's a blow away. It not only can you feel the sparkles in your head as it comes on, but your skin will appreciate it as well. The collagen build is great.
And then on the aging side for the brain, it only takes 100 millisecond slowdown for a person to go from operational and normal to having dementia. 100 milliseconds. It's not a lot. And the typical aging process, the brain is slowing down, a little bit, a couple milliseconds each year. However, we can reverse that and of course slow that down and, in my opinion, stop it and again go backwards through doing things like neurofeedback, meditation, and nootropics. It goes back to the classic adage, use it or lose it. And when we use nootropics, we actually activate different parts of our brains. Same thing with neurofeedback. You can do all kinds of neurofeedback and actually work on activating and connecting different hubs in the mind. And when you do that, you really feel your brain coming back to life and, if you will, aging in reverse. So I think it just goes back down to that. And of course, all kinds of research with aging brains and learning languages and learning instruments. That's probably the best thing you can do. So I think doing neurofeedback, using nootropics, and just learning new things constantly, whether it's music, language, new passions, is the best thing you can do to really turn back the clock on the brain.
And exercise. Don't be afraid to exercise.
Absolutely.
Huge. This product, which you're probably aware of at this point, it's a daytime and nighttime. This is a mental detangler. So when you take a look at what Alzheimer's looks like, right? It's the neural pathways are suddenly starting to get all tangled up, and there's beta amyloid protein and tau proteins that build up. This is specifically developed to remove those. I'm not saying this is a cure for anything, but I am saying that this is proven, the ingredients in it are proven to help remove tau proteins and beta amyloid proteins. So
what do you think are some of the biggest contributors in our diet and environment for the amyloid plaque formation? I've heard like having too much chicken in your diet. What do you guys know about that?
Bad sleep.
Huge.
Bad sleep. I think sleep, out of everything you can do to really optimize your brain, I think great sleep, high quality sleep is probably number one. We know we can fast and operate, right? So I think sleeping is more important than anything else to have a really good brain. And we know the brain cleans itself while you sleep. And we do have the mental reboot PM, which enhances the acidic process that happens to clean the brain. But we've all felt the difference between how you feel when you wake up having a good night's sleep versus a really poor night's sleep. It's literally night and day, no pun intended.
My sleep is on friggin' point. My HRV is the highest it's ever been. I freaking love biohacking and all this stuff. Really, like, I'm having barely any alcohol right now too. And it really is making all the difference. So you mentioned music. And one of the reasons why I see that there is such a really cool link here is because our brain mediates hormones. So when I was in a car crash, I really feel like my pituitary got a bit rocked and my cycle was a little bit off for 2 months actually after that. So our brain releases different constituents and to make things like peptides, which then can be made to make hormones. And when things in our brain are a little bit off, say our neurotransmitters are a little bit off, we got plaques in the way, we got toxins, we're not detoxing while we're sleeping, and we have toxins accumulating, your hormones are going to be out of whack. So that's how this is all really connected. And especially when we hit age 37 to 41, we start to get that estrogen drop off. And then you pretty much overnight can start to see some thinning of the skin. So you're getting the breakdown of collagen and elastin literally happening overnight. My clients tell me this. They're like, I feel like I've aged overnight. So how can we have some fun? How can we live a little bit dangerously? How can we have a little bit of fun, and how can hobbies and music impact our neurochemistry? Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about neurochemistry enhancement. How do hobbies and sometimes live a little dangerously and doing some new things? Hopefully you don't blow yourself up and with some of your experiments, Mr. Noots. But what do you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about neurochemistry and music. So I'm going to the gym after this podcast, and most of us that work out have a playlist. And what is this playlist doing? Whether you're like EDM or Metallica or rap, it's enhancing neurochemistry. You know, whether it's activating adrenaline, noradrenaline, which of course metal will do that, or boosting serotonin because you feel good. It's a great song. Music has a direct impact on neurochemistry. That's why we love music, right? Music is an activator of all these different neurochemicals and hormones. And so that is the link between nootropics and music. And of course, I've been a musician since I'm 12. I've written about 100 songs. I've recorded hard rock album, built an instructional musical company. And I never see myself retiring, but maybe in a few years, in a few decades, I want to spend more time composing and writing music because, yeah, I think it's such a way to change your state of mind and help us process emotions. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm sad, I love listening to a good sad song. Helps me process the grief and get through it faster. I remember seeing that my guitar teacher, he had a rough day and he just grabbed the guitar and just started wailing on this epic melancholic blues solo, and I just saw him process that in real time, and I realized, yeah, that's what musicians do. It's what we artists do. So I think as artists, we feel more, but we also have more resources to process whatever we feel. So yeah, I love music, and it's awesome. So as Mr. Noots, what about you?
So when my parents divorced when I was 9.5, and my sister saw how depressed I was, and I was trying to journal. Right. And when you're that age, your journaling is really bad. It sounds like Dr. Seuss entered your head. It's bad rhymey stuff. She took me to a Chicago concert, the band Chicago, right? And they were a very horn deep band, but very sophisticated music at the time. And I remember I was third row back. I probably had a good contact high because there was plenty of weed being blown in the area. And they did a song called Questions 67 and 68, followed by a song called Dialogue. And I realized that I didn't have to write lyrics. I had to find them. That every emotion that any human being has ever had, every experience they've ever had has been written in a lyric somewhere. And when I got home, I tore apart my dad's record collection, my sister's record collection, my brother's record collection. And I just mined them for all of the wisdom that was within those lyrics and within those chords. And then, of course, when you start tying it to the emotion of a minor chord or a minor 7, right? Or flat 5, right? Or that resolving into a C major, right? Or a G. It's that kind of beautiful course. When my wife died, I got through it with Pearl Jam 10, Dave Matthews' first 2 albums, a Bruce Cockburn album, Seal from his first 2 albums. That was the stuff that gave me, that guided me through. And then it started being, interjected with 9 Inch Nails and a bunch of other really incredible, stuff. In fact, I remember walking, one of the first dates I ever had, we walked into a record store and we heard Anime, the album, right, from 9 Inch Nails, and we go, oh, that's it. This is our Nirvana right here. So yeah, it's super, super important. In fact, when Matt and I get on, we have these weekly calls and with a bunch of other people, and it's, what stack are you on is one of the first questions we ask, right? Well, on top of that, we're starting to look at what song is going through your head, because I don't know about you, but there's very few moments in my life where there's not a song that's tickling my neurons, right? Playing a loop somewhere.
I think that's great that you mentioned that, because one of the things that I personally am feeling is that instead of having the music in our mind, we just have social media noise and agendas in our mind. So I think that to keep your mind calm, clear, collected, be grounded, centered, balanced, and aligned, maybe not check your social and listen and rock out to some of your favorite tunes. Two of my favorite albums are Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power. 5 Minutes Alone, that is literally one of my favorite songs. And Walk, it's just like, I love feeling into that very masculine, raw power essence. And then sometimes a little bit more, you know, feminine. Might listen to some Tibetan bowl music, and it's very ranged, but I've always been that way. I've always grown up as a tomboy. I was never kind of the norm. I was always doing mechanics and playing guitar, and people didn't really quite get me, but you know, I always seemed to stay balanced, and it kept me out of trouble growing up, and drugs and alcohol and partying. It kept me away from that because I always had things to stimulate my mind, and I'm really grateful for that. So if you guys have some kids and you're tuning in here, get them into music, get them into mechanics, get them into taking things apart and putting them back together, not just learning what this tool does and what this tool does, but how does the motor work? And I know that Elon Musk talks about this a lot when he's talking about educating his kids and stuff like that, which is all super fascinating. So do you all have any closing words?
Matt?
Yeah, first of all, I think that we love doing these podcasts because, and I love, you know, people like yourself that's hosting podcasts and getting the word out. You know, a couple of years ago, I had back to intuition. I had this realization about how information disseminates over eons, and we're all playing a role in that. And you know, someone is listening to this message, and they're going to share it with someone else at some point. And just this virality, this positive virality that grows infinitely as we share great things. And you know, our goal is to help the world go from sick to superhuman. It is a spectrum. So if you're on the sicker side, you go to normal, and then normal to excellent, and then excellent to that superhuman level. And you know, we're still striving. We're doing a brain training at the end of this month. We're going to push our brains to the absolute limit because we're on the same quest as we're preaching, and it's a blast. I think once you start tasting what being optimized, being biologically optimized feels like experientially, you just want more. Both Wade, myself, and Mr. Noots were on the quest for, you know, what's the next level. So yeah, it's awesome. And, you know, for everybody listening, get on the train. It's a blast.
It's absolutely. And, you know, I would say that, you know, giving is probably one of the most powerful things internally you can do. In fact, I get so much more out of giving than taking. And I think that's a chasm crossing event for people when they realize that giving is really where things start to show up, when life starts to show up. And so, you know, with the things you're doing, Kayla, or I'm sorry, Rachel, is, you know, you've got this obsession with helping people visually present their very best self. And it's such a difficult thing. Most of us, when I was young, I was at one point, I was in a group and realized that I didn't love myself. And as a result, I couldn't love other people. And so, you know, and they were trying to force me on the other side of it. They were saying, no, just go love other people. I was going, well, I don't love myself. I don't know how to love. And it was when a person came into my life that showed me how to authentically love myself, not out of ego, but out of appreciation, that everything changed. And your ability then, you have unlimited energy then to help support, encourage, and love other people, right? So anyhow, what you're doing is magic. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share on this platform.
Yeah, my pleasure to host, and thanks for being part of this journey with me. We all just, you know, I'm just as much of a learner on this planet as much as you guys are. We all have different missions. We all have different strengths and attributes. And I just think it's great when we come into almost our true power and really understand what our strengths and also our weaknesses are, and things that make us scared and fearful. Like what you said, Matt, when you dive into a song that's got that vibe, that's called shadow work. Feeling into that is good. Anything that's kind of shadowy or fearful or making you scared right now, actually lean into it and feel it and integrate it. And then you will actually shed light on it. It's not about, okay, move through it. It's about actually integrating those qualities of ourselves that we may not like, but that we can actually then improve upon so that we can continue to become our greatest versions. I could preach all day on skincare, lasers, rejuvenation options, products and procedures, but really it's the body, mind, spirit, energy practices. When we learn to cultivate them and optimize them, that's what's going to bring forth a higher level of radiance and beauty. And that's really what I like to consider the holistic science of beauty. It's really that kind of full spectrum integration. So I would love to invite everyone to develop their customized blend of nootropics at nootopia.com. That's nootopia.com/Varga, and use promo code Varga for special savings. I like blends focusing on clarity, positivity, calmness, and a little focused savagery, especially when I want to crash a workout or bust some metal on my guitar. Those are great ones to take as well. And I'm looking forward to the women's products that you're coming out with as well. And if anyone has a question from today's episode, anything I referenced from biohacking supplements, whatever, if you have a question, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, info@rachelvarga.ca, with your skin questions, product reordering, next steps at your at-home and in-clinic skin rejuvenation journey. And I'm more than happy to share exactly some of the Nootopia stacks that I'm taking as well to help you, adaptogens, all of that. You can book a one-on-one call with me at rachelvarga.ca, or hang out with me in my skin camps, or just shoot me a message and let's get the conversation going. Thank you so much, Matt Gallant, Mr. Noots, for being on the show. I look forward to having you back on. And Mr. Noots, in our follow-up session, let's seriously nerd out on things like the LHC, CERN, the latest innovations and discoveries in particle physics, quantum physics. Let's rock out on our guitars a little bit. How's that sound?
Perfect. I'm in.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you both of you for joining us here today and sharing your really beautiful positive vibes, and we'll have you back for sure. Have a good one, everybody.
Bless.